hear that you're the one to talk to about finding work around here.
I might be.
Well, I'm looking for work around here.
If it be work ye looking for, I might be able to help. But I need to know what kind of game he can handle.
I mean, I'm good for most games. Parcheesi, Uno, Risk, Settlers of Catan is a little difficult, but the Cthulhu one's really good.
The game we be hunting be the most dangerous game of all. We be hunting for the great white man.
Are we killing people?
Aye, ever since they made fun of me back in middle school, I've been looking for my revenge. They called me short.
But that's your name.
I don't see how that relates to anything. But they'll pay now, oh yes. They'll pay the only way I know how.
Well, I'm all aboard this plan, Let's ride the crazy train. But, I think, to help us, ease into this working relationship with one another, I think we should, watch a movie before we ship out.
Aye, it has been a while since me last talkie.
So you go settle yourself on the couch and I'll be right in.
All right, I like you.
Hello, police.
I got more comfortable while I was waiting. I'm also going to use a less grating voice.
Go for it.
We watched a movie today.
Age of the Dragon.
Age of the Dragon!
Inspired by Moby Dick by Herman Melville.
Now, when we say inspired, we really say exactly that, with a few minor changes.
Well, I mean, the movie itself, it has all of the characters still named the same.
All the characters named the same. They are hunting for oil that they use in their lamps. The one guy is going out strictly for revenge.
Yeah.
Ahab is, yes, same thing. The only difference being is that instead of whales, it's dragons.
And there's a girl on the ship.
And the ship is on land.
And on wheels.
But besides that, everything's the same.
Oh, let's also forget everything else is also different.
Yeah, okay, so, I mean, I'm literally just going to be summing up Moby Dick here. So anybody who read it or, read the Spark Notes of it or watched some movie adaptation of it, you get the gist of it. But I'll tell you the differences as far as I know them. I have never read Moby Dick or the Spark Notes or watched a movie. He has, so he'll tell you more about that.
Abridged version, to be specific. I didn't read the unabridged version.
We didn't have a year, so...
Or a lifetime. That book is huge.
It is. I've seen it.
It's like War and Peace, which I've also read.
The abridged version?
The abridged version.
Okay.
I read the unabridged version of Crime and Punishment.
I'll take your word on it, man. So this movie opens up with Ishmael. He's sitting at it opens up with a flashback to Ahab's past when the great white dragon attacked his sister. And he ran in with a harpoon. And he's like, ah! And he went to attack it. Didn't end up killing it, but he... got burned over like his entire body, and he's the only one who's faced down the great white dragon
and lived.
So then it picks up with Ishmael and his heterosexual life partner Queequeg, and they are at a bar looking for some work, and they're like, "Hey, the other guys here across the table like, can you man a harpoon?" And he's like, "Yep," and he shows off his harpoon skills, and he's like, "Cool, we're working with Ahab. Let's hop on the ship." Here's his daughter, but not actually his daughter. She's an adopted daughter named Rachel. Rachel has never made an appearance in the books, so this is kind of brand new. Or rather, you said she was like 8 or something?
Like Ahab in the original story, if my memory serves me right, did have a daughter. He had a wife too, I think, at the time where he leaves. But I don't know. One, daughter wasn't fully grown. 2, never once did they they're not on the ship when everything goes down. So that little addition to it was just to make sure that this movie had a romantic interest.
Yeah, which of course it had to.
It needed a Kate Beckinsale romantic interest for the most part.
So when it finally they're moving towards the ship, and then they're stopped by the one guy Elijah, who's like, "Listen to me, that dragon, everyone who goes out with Ahab, only one man will come back and be able to tell the tale." So that's the prophecy of the story here.
Yeah. Which is based on the real book too, but it's not really a prophecy.
It's just a thing he said. So then Ahab, because of his burns, is not able to handle light. It hurts his skin. So he's wrapped up almost head to toe, the entire thing, except for parts where they could afford to have the actor.
Where they had Danny Glover.
Danny Glover! We didn't say that to begin with. Danny Glover!
For 11 days, they had him on set, so
Yep.
they got the most that they could out of him.
But they filmed longer than 11 days, so whenever they needed that, they just wrapped him up head to toe, used a body double, and then gave him dub-over lines.
Yeah.
So they go through, they find their first, they have the buddy-buddy scene where everyone gets to know everybody, the first mate and everyone else. Then they get into the first fight against the dragon, and Ishmael freezes up. He's not able to throw his harpoon. As a result, the first mate, played by, what's his name?
I'm checking right now.
It was that other famous guy that you like so much.
Oh, that I like so much. It was what was it? Vinnie Jones.
Vinnie Jones.
From Guy Ritchie
who
fame.
did he play, since you have it up?
He played Stubb.
Stubbs. So Stubbs, he's the guy who always has a story.
And a pipe.
He ended up being dead by Dragon Flame, and they criticize Ishmael. They're like, "Oh, you got to be able to pull the trigger, pretty much." So, continuing on, we get to know Ahab a bit more. We get to know that everybody's in it for the money of the oil, dragon oil, but he's in it for revenge, and that's like everyone's like, "Yo, we're not in it for that.
We're in it for the coin."
If the white dragon shows up, great white dragon, we're like, we're not going to turn tail and run, but we're also not going to plunge head first into it. We're just,
we were not going to die for you.
Yeah, exactly. So over the course of the story, the romantic interest between Ishmael and Rachel builds. There's another person on crew who also is into Rachel and therefore hates Ishmael because he's the one moving in.
Because he's dicking the girl. I want a dick.
Yeah, pretty much.
I want to put my dick in that.
So then it moves to... There's a bunch of inconsequential scenes, but the one that really drives it is that finally they come to a head and they're like, "Yo, we're not about to go into the White Dragon's lair just for you." Ishmael's like, "I will stop you." And he's like, "Yeah, okay." Chain him up, put him in the back of the ship. And the first mate's like, "All right, I'll do that." Hey, Ahab. Oh no! Turns the knife and he gets killed himself.
That was Starbuck.
Starbuck, yes. So all that's left now is Ishmael, Queequeg, Rachel, Ahab, and the other crew member. They finally reach a point where their land ship isn't going to be able to go any further, and they plop down anchor, and they're like, "All right, we're going to have to walk for the rest of this." But just as they're doing that, the other shipmate tries to essentially rape Rachel.
I need you. I want you. I need to feel you.
Okay, nope.
And Ishmael comes in.
Ishmael comes in, knocks his ass, sends him out packing into the snow. So now it's down to 4. They're hunting up the mountain. They get to the lair of the great white dragon. Oh, there's also a scene in there where they stop and they find a whole nest of dragon, like 30 of them.
And they're just going
and they just go in and, like, while they're all sleeping, just get... And they're like, "Cool.
Wyverns.
We just made
Wyverns.
millions of dollars. We are so incredibly rich." But he's like, "Yeah, but the white dragon's that way, so we're going to go do that and fuck your oil." And he's like...
And I love the fact that they were saying, I was like, why don't we go back to get the oil? No time. Yeah, I think you have time.
We have plenty of time.
I mean, you have plenty of time.
But whatever. So then finally they reach the lair of the dragon, and Queequeg's like, "Yo, I'm like the with the nature sort of guy. Like, I don't do the whole killing except in like self-defense sort of thing. So I'm not going in there." And Ishmael's like, cool. I respect that. You stay out here.
Then he goes in there.
He sees the white dragon returning, so he's like going to warn them or whatever later on. But Rachel, Ishmael, and Ahab are in there. And the whole reason that we said Rachel was not his daughter technically was that it's mentioned earlier on that Ahab and her father went in to the lair of Father Dragon, but the dragon killed him. And he fought valiantly, but he didn't manage to survive. Turns out what actually happened and what we discovered because we see the body is that he tried to run once confronting the dragon.
I just realized something.
And was stabbed through the back with a harpoon by Ahab. So Ahab's actually the one who killed him because of his cowardice. What did you realize?
Why were they spending so much time trying to track the dragons where Ahab has already been to the dragon's lair?
Because they didn't want to explain that part.
That is a huge fucking plot hole.
So then Ahab explains, like, yes, that. But then he also explains that his own legend of him, like, facing down the dragon was actually a lie. He didn't end up facing down the dragon. When he
Pussed out like a bitch.
He saw his sister there, and he ran the fuck away. And it was only while he was
Now,
like...
to be fair...
Oh, yeah, everyone would.
I mean, like, it's a dragon, guys. Like, I watched this episode of Lucifer recently where it was all about this guy who was demonized for leaving a burning car with his research instead of saving the Uber driver. So the Uber driver died, and he got demonized for it because, you know, he's like, oh, you should have saved him. I was like, there's nothing I could do. But I'm like, if you put that context with a dragon...
Yeah, that's...
I'm sorry, like, I love my family, but, you know, there's a...
Here's the playing out of the
There's
situation.
meaningful death, and then there's useless death.
Here's the point of the situation. Either one person's going to die, or two people are going to die.
And also, like, Ahab, like, he didn't even have a harpoon with him. He had, like, a knife.
He had, like, a knife.
I was like, I'm going to charge down this... No, of course he wasn't going to do
He
that.
ran away, he got burns over his body when he tried to hide, and he ends up breaking down, being like, I still hear her screams. That's what I'm trying. I'm trying to face down my fears. I'm trying to finally have vengeance and stop the screaming.
Yeah. Which is interesting, because like, it's dealing with survivor's guilt.
Mm-hmm. And which, is fair, but it's going to an extreme. But,
yeah.
Finishing up the plot, Rachel and Ishmael say, like, hey, you're fucking nuts. We're out. And he's like, oh, well, I'll treat you like I treated your father. And he goes to throw a thing, and then Queequeg shouts up. He's like, oh,
No!
Ishmael. And so, in one swift motion, yoink, flip, over, gets Queequeg through the chest. Ishmael's like, what the fuck? But before he can, like, do anything about it, White Dragon comes down, and Ahab's like, at hell's heart I stab at thee. And he stabs him through the neck, doesn't end up stopping him. Rope gets tied around his body, and he's just
He gets dragged and
dragged
yanked.
up and away and just banging on the cave walls as it goes. And the movie ends with Ishmael and Rachel standing there, only one man having survived. Fucking Lord of the Rings ass shit.
I am no man.
And the White Dragon flying over the mountains with Ahab just dangling down beneath him.
Which, honestly, is very similar to what it actually was in the book, because in the original novel, for those people who know, is that Ahab does get killed when he's trying to kill Moby Dick, and he gets lashed to Moby Dick's back, and he just drowns. So, you know, when the Moby Dick starts peaking again, you just see him just kind of like dead, just like dragging on with the whale there. But like,
So,
okay, I guess we're just going into it.
I guess right now we haven't really said what we thought of the entirety of the movie. Compared to all the ratings, compared to all the criticisms, compared to everything else we've seen. How do we feel about the movie?
It kept my interest.
Yeah, it wasn't the worst.
No, actually, like I was telling David when we were like maybe half an hour into the movie, we're like, I'm getting major creature vibes by this.
Yeah.
It's like it's not a great movie, but at the same time, though, you can tell what they were going with, and they actually succeed on a couple different things.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things that are like, all right, land ships, you need to have a ship. I get it, that's fine. But like,
You could have called it something else.
but like the fact that like they made dragon's oil being like highly combustive sort of
Yeah.
stuff. It makes sense with from a dragon standpoint, you know?
Well, it's basically what was it? It's like the dragon's fire stuff that they
Yeah.
had in Game of Thrones.
I mean, it's just the whole. No, what was it? Oh, God, what is
the
it?
green.
The wildfire?
Yeah, it's like
Black fire? I don't know.
dragons. It was some type of fire.
Fire,
It was the green fire that they used to set
Spoiler!
set the water on fire. If you haven't seen that season of Game of Thrones by
Okay,
this
I thought
point,
you were talking about a later season.
No. I'm talking about way earlier on, like the Battle of King's Landing.
Gotcha. So yeah, they make it so it's a big big thing, and that works because I mean dragons. I associate them with fire much more than I associate the oil of a whale.
Yeah.
With that sort of stuff. So that makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
But then it comes down to things like like I said, the land ship. It's like, okay, yes,
It's a tank.
everyone has their own individual harpoons, but they also have like the really big crossbow harpoon, like out of a Hobbit.
Like
sort
it's a
of thing.
ballista.
Yeah, they have that thing, and like, okay, I understand you can't carry that around with you, and you need to carry that with something. But at the same time, there are so many questions raised by the existence of this tank.
Yeah.
Like, how is it being powered? How is it being moved? What is
You
it?
hear
Horses?
it cranks,
Yeah,
and
they
you
have like.
see like levers and stuff.
Like
but
I was like, do they have a combustion engine? And then you're like saying like, oh, it's just like oversized clockwork. I'm like, okay, clockwork still needs a power source.
I'm like, they probably had just like this jar of like dragon oil, and just because it says whenever you expose it to air,
Yeah,
it combusts.
And they show like them throwing it over hills.
yeah, and like it's like has like a bleeder valve that just like
Then we likened it to just there being 4 people that you never saw underneath the dock.
Dragon fuel combustion engine. Yeah. So, or else it's like Snowpiercer and they have a well, that's a bigger spoiler. Sorry. Well, I spoils the whole fucking movie.
Whoops.
Not me. It's a good movie. Go see it if you haven't. But what was it? I didn't actually. I thought that the practical effects that they had were actually pretty decent.
They were pretty damn. There was like the scene when they were sneaking through that cave.
Yeah.
There was one point where they focused on like a sleeping dragon, and we went back and double checked. We're like, was that special? Was that practical? Whatever it was damn good.
Yeah, and there was like, what was it? We were comparing the practical effects. I remember also when they were like stitching up Ishmael, like that was really well done. So they and also the scarring that they had on Danny Glover was also really done. So they had a really good makeup department.
They did, but at the same time, I feel like they were too proud of it in that one scene where it was like, "Oh, we found the white whale! Look at my bird! Look!" And he just held it up for like a straight 30-second conversation of him just holding up his shirt. It's like, Danny, you don't have to do that.
That was more of a direction probably than anything else. But
it was them really wanting to show off, like, no, it's all of his body. It's not just his face. All of his body.
And Danny fucking owns every scene that he's in.
God.
I think out of all the movies that we have included Danny Glover in for this show, that this is without a doubt my most favorite performance of him.
Like every time that
owns it.
Every time I imagine Ahab, I always imagine like that last line, that with hell's heart I stab, just over the top, just He does that for the entirety of his
He's
life.
at 11 the whole time. I think the only time when he's not is when you first get introduced to him like face to face.
Yeah.
But then after that it's just like I'm like, I love it.
I will double whoever spots the dragon first. No!
Was it
triple?
When he's like convincing, like actually there's a couple speeches that he has in there. I don't know how much it's lifted from the original text because it's been a long time since I've read it. There's
at least several direct lines, so I have to assume some speeches.
Yeah, there's definitely lines that I remember. Especially the Hell Heart line. That's like the most famous line in the whole thing. Besides "Call Me Ishmael."
Did they say that to begin with? I missed that line if they did.
What? Call Me Ishmael? I don't think so. All right. I don't think I don't. But then again, I could have missed it.
Yeah, we might have missed that. We were still settling in.
Yeah. It's work. This is work.
This is work.
But for the most part, like I liked the acting of pretty much everybody in here.
Yeah.
I thought that Vinny was an interesting choice. I didn't realize that was him until I was looking up through IMDb, and I'm like, oh, Vinny Jones.
I think
he's talking a lot in this one. It's so different than his other roles.
I think the only person I really had a problem, not even a problem, the only person I wasn't super impressed with was Rachel.
Yeah.
Was like, she just played...
She's just kind of generic badass.
She was this strong, badass woman, and it's like, okay, yeah.
It's cool.
But so many times the strong, badass woman is like emotionally cold for most of the movie. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's fine, but there's no character there. Like, I'm not... Yes, I pick up on what you're supposed to be, but I'm not seeing your talents as an actress. I'm seeing you just like... I have to serve with Ahab. He saved my father. And like, okay, can we like smile or frown or do anything?
Any emotion, please.
Anything.
Like, guys, a strong character is not... I hate, like...
It's strong through actions, not through emotion.
Well, it is at the same time, though. Like, it's... I tell my students all the time that film is the act of subtlety. So even though, Danny went full 11 the entire performance and stuff like that, he was able to like shift emotions still.
That part when he was, I mean, he still was shouting the whole time, but that part when he was giving his ending like reveal that he didn't stay and fight, he did that.
I was a coward.
It was genuine. He wasn't just not all shouting from him was the same. There was sad shouting. There was angry shouting.
Manic shouting.
He was able to portray emotions through shouting. And that's very good.
Usually there's very few people who can do that. I mean, Al Pacino is definitely one. I think that's all he does now. Or he has been doing for the last, 20 years. But at the same time, a lot of the minor characters, I wouldn't necessarily say they were memorable, but at the same time, though, they had their own personalities.
Yeah, everybody had their own...
They were defined.
They set that up at the beginning when they were introducing the whole crew. They're like, here's the first mate. Here's he like lost his wife and child to disease, and there's a loss in his eyes, and I'm like, wow, I hope that we actually get focused on these people, because if they're setting this much for nothing, that's going to be such a disappointment.
That's the thing, though, because one of my favorite adaptations, off of my memory, of course I haven't seen it in years, but one of my favorite adaptations of Moby Dick was a made-for-TV version that had Patrick Stewart as Ahab.
Yes.
And I can't remember who played Ishmael in that. But I remember that one. That one, you felt the life of what it was like on that ship. How, like, if you have, like, if you're on a day with no wind or something like that, how much that will affect you mentally. There wasn't a whole lot of the psychology that goes on between these characters that you find in the original novel. Now, if we were going to divorce ourselves completely from the novel, just focusing on the movie itself, that you get some basis, you get some the basic narration introductions that you got, and that was enough. It wasn't over the top either. I didn't think that the exposition dump really lasted all that long, and we really didn't get another one after that.
I mean, they didn't even really explain, at least in one sentence, in one like speech at the beginning, they didn't explain like how dragons in the world work.
No.
They said like there have been dragons, and then later on they said like, and the dragons have been driven back into like mountains and caves.
Yeah.
Like they say, like they reveal it over a course of time through how conversations would happen.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. It wasn't just like, I'm sure as you know as well as I do that dragons, like, no, that's the shittiest type of exposition where you're just saying it for no reason.
Yeah, no, they are interacting as if all of this stuff that they're saying is all common knowledge. Mm-hmm. And they're able to let us bleed more into the world of what the details are. Like when they're shouting toward the end where they're like trying to convince Ahab not to go after the dragon, where he's just like, all these years of going back and getting done in by these oil traders and all that kind of stuff every year just so I can go out on another hunt to try to find this. Like, that was actually a good scene in my personal opinion, that it was, not only did you get an understanding of Ahab's view of the world, what he does in order to make himself go through the world, like what drives him. I mean, it was clear it was vengeance from the get-go, but this is the one where it became less about vengeance and more about, like, this will give my life meaning.
Right.
And every time I go back, and it's vitriol that they call it. It's like every time we sell the vitriol to these oil salesmen, that I feel this is a means to an end. I'm not about getting rich. I'm about getting my revenge here. Right. And of course, toward the end of the movie, we come to find out that it's not really revenge he's after, it's redemption in a way. It's not like he's trying to redeem himself in his sister's eyes. He has guilt about leaving her, but at the same time, though, the fact that he ran away didn't change anything.
He doesn't know what will stop those memories of screaming of his sister.
Yeah.
But he's hoping that killing the dragon will do it. He's
Which,
willing
of course,
to try anything to stop it.
And that's one thing that you actually did not have with the original Ahab. Ahab's character is significantly complex and whatnot, but vengeance for what happened to him and kind of proving almost a god complex over Moby Dick is kind of like what his whole motivation is. So if honestly, actually, I feel that Danny Glover's motivation in this one is actually more nuanced than the original Ahab.
I fully agree, but I feel like that is completely cut short by the fact that it's in a fantasy setting.
It is.
It is cut off at the kneecaps because of it.
Honestly, one of the worst parts of the movie is the fact that they're still on land.
Yeah.
One of the major reasons why the original story is so fucking terrifying in certain parts is because you're literally in the middle of the ocean. And if your ship breaks, you just got you in water. And just say, for instance, like, because, of course, at the end of the original Moby Dick, the whale goes and wrecks the ship. Like, it was after Ahab already died. So, like, they didn't have that happen here.
I feel like they were trying to set that because they kept on pointing to like the mountains. Or something. That's where they were headed. These desolate, terrible mountains. Yeah. And I feel like if they had made a point of like at a certain point along the trip saying like, all right, this is the point where if we like lose our ship or something like that, we will not be able to make it back to a town.
But then
we will die.
But all
out
they
there."
just do is just like, we have to walk from here.
Yeah, exactly.
And like
They
we never feel the lifeline to that ship that we should.
Yeah.
Because that's what you got from the original story, that the Pequod was like, it wasn't just their, the only place where they could stay where it was dry, but also because like this was their fortress. This is their only defense against their prey. And that was the same thing basically with the dragons in this one, because it didn't look like the dragons were, the fire affected the tank all that much.
It didn't.
So
All they had specifically during the first mate dying scene, during what was it, Stubbs? During him dying, they specifically showed like he ducked down underneath the railing or whatever,
Yeah.
and the fire just sort of dissipated. It was only when, because the cord got wrapped around him, he was forced to stay upright.
Yeah.
That's when he was hit, and that's when he burned to a crisp.
yeah.
So as soon as you're able to, this thing is impenetrable to dragon fire, which sounds very impressive.
Well, he was also like saying like, how the rope was like, the dragon intestines basically. So they were like, they were
were
almost
treated,
impossible
they
to
were
cut
impossible.
and all that stuff. So yeah, like, so they actually did try to go through and develop a significant, I wouldn't say significant, at least a baseline amount of lore
Yeah.
to make their story in this setting work. And I actually think that for the most part they did. I think the mechanics, again, like of the ground ship was not exactly the best when it came down to really, what's the word? To really sink in like that desperation. You don't get that with
No,
this.
not at all.
And you, honestly, like, especially they have horses and stuff.
Yeah.
Like with them, so it's just, and of course they disappear too.
Yeah, I'm remembering those horses now.
I
I'm like,
remember
where
the
did they go?
horses, yeah, unless they were the people who were following them, but I don't remember that
Yeah.
because they
There was
didn't
a
appear that
bandit
they did
scene.
though. There's a bandit scene where they're trying to steal the vitriol and it was just like 2 people
Yeah.
and then they just get killed.
Whatever.
Whoops.
So yeah, that was that. I'll just go into final thoughts. Then. Final thoughts. For me, the weakest part of this movie was the cinematography. There was
I
never
agree.
really anything that really stood out there. But overall, special effects, practical effects. The main white dragon. Whenever the dragons are given too
The
much,
dragons are a little janky.
whenever the dragons are given too much focus, it's very iffy. It's very hit or miss.
Yeah.
But like when they hit him in darkness in that cave scene, and what's very likely practical effects, totally fine. Overall, I think that this movie, like I said, was cut off at the kneecaps as soon as you made it a fantasy setting, because that automatically, like, it. If you're not Lord of the Rings, if you're not Harry Potter, you are immediately going to have to work 1,000 times harder.
Yeah.
And this didn't set up a world. This set up, the medieval age, and then dragons are also real. It didn't.
Which the original Moby Dick didn't take place in the medieval ages
Yeah.
either.
It didn't create this entire setting that like you could become absorbed into. You're just like, all right, so you know how the world was about like 500 years ago? Imagine that plus dragons. And you're like, okay, but
I think they probably could have done a better job setting up the marketplace in the very beginning of the movie.
possibly just
and
to
that
make
would
it
have been
feel
able
more
to.
like
would-
a setting.
Yeah, it would have been able to give it a bit more of a kind of like a
but-
tangibleness to it.
Hey, woulda, coulda, shoulda. But but when it comes down to acting, when it comes down to effects, when it comes down to the motivation, especially of Ahab, that is by far the driving force of the entire plot. That works a lot better for me than, from what I hear at least, of the original Moby Dick. So overall, I'm gonna say critics are probably wrong in this one, unless it's save for the problems we already stated with the cinematography. It wasn't particularly super enjoyable. It wasn't like me sitting there like, yay, dragons!
Yeah.
But just looking at it from a filmmaking perspective, it's entirely serviceable.
Yeah. I don't think that. Yeah, I agree. I don't think it deserves necessarily nearly as many of the bad reviews that it's gotten. I mean, if I had to give this a rating out of like 10, I would probably give it a 6 out of 10. And it's like, and yeah, so it's a movie that is worth watching at least once, probably at least maybe more, maybe at least twice. But it's not just worth watching just because okay you have the experience. You're actually able to get something more out of it that you weren't originally expecting about going into an adaptation of Moby Dick with dragons.
Yeah.
We
Which
were
is
not.
exactly what we did.
Yeah, we were not going into this movie whatsoever thinking that we were going to get something really substantial out of it. I was going there to see Danny Glover chew the scenery and go after a dragon, which is exactly what we got. So, it's truth in advertising.
Yeah, I was expecting like Asylum level dragons. But,
Yeah, but no, actually, like, the Asylum creatures are worse than this one. And I don't know the budget on this movie. I know that Val Kilmer apparently was supposed to originally be the person who played Ahab. I don't know how that got messed up. I would have been interested to see it either way, but I think Danny Glover did a really good job, considering the fact he was also only on set for 11 days. But overall, I think that the movie is, I agree. Like, I wouldn't say it's 100% enjoyable, but at the same time, it's enjoyable enough that I would at least say, check this out if it at least mildly interests you.
Yep. And those are our thoughts on
Age of the Dragons.
And now, it finally be time.
Time for me to get my revenge on every last man, woman, and child who's wronged me. It is my fate. It is my...
This is mutiny! I will have my revenge! It is my fate, my destiny! Oh God, I don't want to go to jail.
You did good, Matt. You did good.
Made possible by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.